really want to know, then come on, let's go. Take a stroll down those...
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into the Country Roads Webcast, brought to you by Trio 4 Productions. I'm your host, Jordan Cruz, and we're here to recap the Mountaineers' first game of the season. The Mountaineers started off 1-0, following a 40-14 win over the Tennessee Volunteers on Saturday, and it was a great performance. Offense performed as expected, and as I mentioned in my defensive preview show, the defense, I think, really surprised the people. This isn't last year's defense, especially on the defensive line. They looked really impressive at times. That being said, let's talk about the people that started the game. Defensive-wise, the starters that ran out first. At DN, you had Reese Donahue. Actually, may have surprised people that he got the start over Ezekiel Rose, but he really performed well. Nose tackle, Kenny Bigelow, and that guy sure was impressive. We'll get more into him later on, but he's going to be a big difference, and I think one of the better defensive tackles in the conference, actually. Other defensive end was Jabril Robinson, Will linebacker David Long, Mike linebacker Dylan Tonkery, Sam linebacker Charlie Benton. One of the corners was Hakeem Bailey, and Josh Norwood got the start at the other corner. Free safety was Kenny Robinson. Bandit safety Toyus Avery, and Spur safety Drayvon Askew Henry. As far as the starters on the offense, quarterback, of course, Will Greer. Martell Pettaway actually ended up getting the start at the running back. It was a kind of a highly debated position battle as to who was going to get the start there, but all four of the running backs did indeed end up playing. We reported here on the Country Roads Webcast the week before game week that at that time Letty Brown was actually the favorite to start, and he did receive a lion's share of the carries, almost equal with Pettaway. I think he had one less carry, but those two guys were really impressive. Letty Brown, I think, is going to be a really good player, and I think the only thing that's keeping him from starting right now is kind of learning the protection schemes more as far as pass blocking is concerned. But Pettaway was the first one out there, and Letty Brown had a lot of carries as well, and then you've seen Sinkfield some. And the most surprising thing maybe was that Kennedy McCoy was actually the last one to get in there. Dana said he was saving him for the second half so he could have some fresh legs, but I think that's kind of really surprising. A lot of people figured he would be the feature back, and he's kind of looking like he's the fourth one right now. And I think that as of right now, you got Pettaway and Brown are going to be splitting the majority of the carries, and then Alex Sinkfield looks like he'll be your change of pace back coming in and giving the fresh legs a lot. Wide receivers, Seals on the outside and Marcus Sims on the outside. Jennings was in the slot, of course, and then at tight end, Trevon Wesco lined up there. Left tackle, Yodnik Adjust. Left guard, Josh Seals. At center, where another position battle been going on, Matt Jones did get the start there, and then at right guard, Joe Brown, the JUCO transfer, ended up getting the start there as well, and he looked pretty good. And then right tackle was Colton McKivitz. So those are the guys that trotted out there on the first series for the defense and the first series for the offense. Some surprises there for some. Maybe a lot of it looked the way that we thought it would look, but the position battles kind of will remain fluid throughout the season, I feel like. As far as the offense is concerned, Dana mentioned in the pregame on the radio leading up to the game that the offense had been tweaked a little bit by him and Jake Spavital, and that was the first time he had kind of revealed that. He said, they had been there scheming it up since like June, and you could tell a difference. The offense, went 12 personnel, 11 personnel, and they used those tight ends. People had said maybe it's just all smoke and mirrors, but they did. Haskins was in there, Trevon Wesco was in there, so the offense looks like they may do a few different things and try and really confuse defenses so that they can't key on the things that they did last season. And the defense as well gave some new looks. You see them come down to a four-man front on a few snaps, and they may need that actually more as the season goes along due to depth at linebacker and injury concerns, which I'll get to a little bit later. But with that being said, let's get into kind of summarizing this game a little bit. On the offense's very first drive, they got into their red zone, and once they got into there, they were down to about the 10-yard line. And they went 12 personnel, actually, one running back, two tight ends, with both Javani Haskins and Trevon Wesco lined up attached on the right side of the line. and they went under center on that play. Brought in Tevin Bush into the slot and ran a end-around jet sweep type of deal for him. So that was a different look going under center with the 12 personnel with the two tight ends both on the same side of the line. And you saw a lot of tight formations from this West Virginia offense, kind of reminiscent of what they did in 2016 when they won 10 games with Skylar Howard as the quarterback. Kind of a lot of people thought we would do last season was have that type of run game and those tight formations and incorporate them and add more passing, spread things for Will Grier, and it kind of went more just to spread it out for Will Grier. And I think this season they're really trying to be multiple with what they can do and have tight formations, not only with the tight end and stuff, but have the receivers in tight as well, a lot of those formations, and then they can still spread you out. And you even see them go under center a couple times. So I think the offense is really trying to be unpredictable and have some different looks this season, and I like the way it looked. The defense on the very first series, they forced a 3-and-out, and from the very first play, Kenny Bigelow, the graduate transfer from USC, you felt his presence. He got into the backfield, blew by the center, hit Tennessee's quarterback Garantano, and forced a fumble. And so they had to start behind the chains right there from the very beginning. And then the defense stopped them on second and third and forced a 3-and-out. And I think it was really impressive. The defense came out really, really dialed in, and they were really flying around. Tony Gibson has mentioned that this may be the fastest defense he's had since he's been a defensive coordinator, and they sure looked it on Saturday. On third downs, the defense kind of gave a different look at times. You've seen Ezekiel Rose come in, and you've seen Jeffrey Pooler come in as well. And they still went with a three-man front, but Jeffrey Pooler actually went into what would be the nose tackle spot, and Ezekiel Rose and Jabril Robinson were on the ends, but all three of those guys were standing up. And a lot of times they brought Javon Askew-Henry down from his spur position near the line, almost giving it a four-down lineman look there on third downs. And they did that a lot on third downs and brought in that personnel with Pooler, Rose, and Robinson, and had all three of the defensive linemen standing on third downs, especially third and longer situations. On those third and long situations, they also went with two linebackers a lot and added a sixth defensive back, and Derek Pitts came in on those third and long situations, and you had David Long and Dylan Tonkery manning the linebacker spots there. So it was kind of a 3-2-6 look actually on the third downs a lot, with Pitts coming in as that sixth defensive back in your dime nickel situations. You've seen both the Stills brothers get to play in this game actually, and they even played together on WVU's second defensive series of the game. Dante at defensive end and Darius at nose tackle. And as impressive as Kenny Bigelow was at nose tackle, Darius Stills was right there just as impressive as well. So, and then I mentioned Jeffrey Pooler came in at times, and so West Virginia can go up to 7 or 8 defensive linemen deep on the D line and do that consistently. And you've seen a lot of different looks with all those guys rotating in and out, and it was really impressive the way this defensive line looks, and it looks like one of the more impressive defensive lines that West Virginia has had, especially since Tony Gibson has been here, and of all time maybe. It's as far as depth is concerned, this defensive line is really, really deep, really impressive, and it can be really multiple with the looks that they throw out at the opposing offenses. As far as the offense is concerned, I mentioned Martell Pettaway got the start, and he looked pretty good. A lot of the time I've seen when he caught a pass out of the backfield, or if he got a handoff, more times than not he made that first tackler and missed. So it looks like Pettaway's going to see a lion's share of the carry, as well as I mentioned Lady Brown too. But Pettaway, I think, did a good job making the first tackler and miss, and sometimes it looked like he was going to be stopped for a 4 or 5 yard loss, and he at least got back and got 2 or 3 yards out of it from making tacklers miss. And he had a really impressive run on a draw play that I think went for about 22 yards, and he was carrying 5 or 6 Tennessee defenders 4 or 5 yards at the end of that run. So Pettaway looks strong and looks good, and he can make the tacklers miss and shed tacklers pretty good. So I think Martell Pettaway looks really improved, and I can see why they ended up going with him as the starter in this game, and he really impressed in that game week of practice, I believe. The Mountaineers' first drive on offense ended in a field goal, but on that offense's second drive, the WVU fans got to get a good look at a guy that the coach has been talking about a lot all offseason, got set out last year, and that was Alabama transfer wide receiver TJ Simmons. They said David Seals, it was actually a play that was going to be designed for him, but he needed a break, and you've seen Simmons come in, and that itself is big because last year these guys couldn't get a lot of breaks even when they needed them, because they didn't really have backup receivers that they trusted and felt like they had depth and didn't have the rapport with Will Grier. But this season you're definitely seeing that, as I'll get more into later, but there's a slew players catching passes this year, and it's really impressive the weapons this offense has. That being said, T.J. Simmons came in, and the offense was in 12 personnel from the pistol. Pettaway was the back. You had Haskins on one side as a tight end and Wesco on the other, and only 2 receivers in the set, in Marcus Sims and T.J. Simmons on the other side. And they play action to Pettaway. Sims ran a deep post type route, and Simmons came across the other side of the field on a crossing route. And Will Greer seen him coming, hit him perfectly in stride. T.J. Simmons shedded one tackler, hit the sideline, and he was gone, man. That guy, he can fly. He looked really impressive on that catch and run. And much like Amos Zaraway back in 1996, T.J. Simmons' first touch ever as a Mountaineer went to the house for a touchdown from 59 yards out, and was also the West Virginia's first touchdown of the season, and put the Mountaineers up 10-0. And the Mountaineers held on to that 10-0 lead to end the first quarter. A very impressive first quarter, especially for the defense. Some of the stats from on the defensive side of things from the first quarter. Total yards, West Virginia had 139, and the defense held Tennessee to only 27 yards in the first quarter, and also held Tennessee and forced them into negative 17 rushing yards after the first quarter. So the defense was really flying around out there and living in the Tennessee backfield, especially in that first quarter, as they had 6 tackles for a loss in the first quarter alone and a sack. And that defensive line was really impressive, I think. And I think this Mountaineer defense, if it can play like this throughout the season, this team's going to be really dangerous, especially with the offense that everyone expected West Virginia to have and ended up showing up. Starting now in the second quarter, on WVU's first defensive series of the second quarter, we saw starting Sam linebacker Charlie Benton go down with a knee injury, and have learned since then that knee injury will require surgery and knock him out for the rest of the season. And that's a tough blow for this Mountaineer defense, as they were already thin at the linebacker position after losing Brennan Ferns and Quandarius Qualls, who was penciled in as the starter at that position already. They're out for they're almost the whole season. They're expected to maybe come back for the last month of the season, whereas Benton is lost for the year with his happening in the season. So at Sam linebacker now, West Virginia's down to what would be essentially the third string there. And I think that you may see a lot of 2 linebacker looks from West Virginia going on throughout the season here. In this game, you've seen them come out in that 4 down linemen and 2 linebackers and 5 defensive backs, that kind of 4-2-5 look. And so they have actually worked on that. And had they not worked on that previously, I think that you wouldn't see it. But where they have worked on it, I think you'll see it more going forward in the season, especially with the defensive line being a big strength for the Mountaineers and being thin at linebacker now, having to replace now a 3rd linebacker. Like I said, in the play following the injury to Benton, West Virginia did show that 4-2-5 look, and they had Donahue and Bigelow in as what would be the tackles there, as they were both on the inside, and then you had Ezekiel Rose and Jabril Robinson on the in routes, and the 2 linebackers in that look were, of course, Dylan Tonkery and David Long. I think that you can use this look a lot going forward for West Virginia in the season. And, you can get those 4 linemen in there, or you can even bring in Darius Stills and have Darius Stills and Kenny Bigelow play together at those tackle spots. I think that would be really intimidating for opposing offenses, especially considering how good both of those guys played at that nose tackle spot. And then, take your pick between Rose, Donahue, and Robinson at the ends. There's a lot of looks you can use if you're going to use that 4 down lineman defensive front this year with the depth that WVU has on the defensive line. Former walk-on linebacker Shea Campbell did end up coming in to fill that 3rd linebacker spot for the majority of the game. But I think that he's not exactly where the coaches would like him to be yet. He can play if they need him to, but I think that you'll see a guy like Exree Lowe come in and man that spot when they go 3 linebackers a lot for the remainder of the year. But Shea Campbell's still a possibility there. But I think you got Exree Lowe and Josh Chandler as well that are possibilities to come in and man that spot. So there are guys there. They're just young and inexperienced. And in Campbell's case, he's a former walk-on. But I think that guys like Exree Lowe and Josh Chandler may have to grow up in a hurry for when WVU wants to use those 3 linebacker looks and still run that 3-3-5 alignment on defense. Following the injury to Benton, WVU did struggle to stop Tennessee on the drive, as Tennessee did drive all the way down, and it was a 17-play drive, covered 78 yards. The Mountaineer defense did tighten up and force a 4th and goal, but Tennessee scored their first touchdown on that 4th and goal. and that drive spanned almost 9 minutes. I think it was 8 minutes and 47 seconds or something like that. And so 17 plays, 78-yard drive, took up almost 9 minutes off the clock, and that's what Tennessee wanted to do in this game. That was their game plan, is to have long drives and possess the ball and keep this West Virginia offense off the field, and they did manage to do that once in the second quarter. I mentioned Letty Brown earlier and how he saw a lion's share of carries. His first action came on WVU's final drive of the first half with under 2 minutes to go, when they tried to execute that 2-minute drill and get down and get some points before the half, which they were successful in doing so. And Letty Brown's first official carry came on a draw play, and he picked up 11 yards and looked good. He moves quick, and he stiff-armed a guy, broke a couple tackles, and I think Letty Brown's going to be really impressive and only get better as the season goes on, being a true freshman that wasn't an early enrollee and only getting here just recently in the summer. WVU did manage to get a field goal out of that final drive when they were executing the 2-minute drill and pushed their lead to 13-7 at the half. Now, halftime was extended due to a 65-minute weather delay caused by lightning in the area, and so we had to wait a little bit longer to see these Mountaineers perform in the second half, and I think that it really benefited them well, especially when you see how great they came out and played in this second half. In the first half, you could say Will Greer was a little bit off than normal than he typically is. He missed a couple would have been touchdown throws. David Sills beat a guy streaking down the sideline. He slogged there right through him. Alex Sinkfield, the redshirt freshman running back, ran a wheel route out of the backfield and was matched up against a linebacker and had him beat, and Will Greer slightly overthrew him as well, and would have been a would-be touchdown. And so Will Greer was a little bit off than what we're accustomed to in the first half, but he more than made up for it in the second half, as did the rest of the offense. In the first half, they were 0 for 3 on third downs, and when they came out in the second half, they ended up being 5 or 6 on third downs. So they really got more efficient in this second half, and that's what you want to see going forward, and that's what the coaches have preached about all offseason, is this offense being more efficient. And we saw just what they mean with how efficient the offense was in the second half. And if West Virginia's offense can be that efficient throughout this season, and the defense can play the way they did in this game, this team's going to be very, very good, I think. So getting into the second half now, after this long weather delay, the Mountaineers did defer on the coin toss, so they got the ball to open the second half. And as I mentioned, they really started off hot, and as it took only 4 plays for them to get down the field and put in their second touchdown of the game, and it was a 32-yard strike from Will Greer to David Sills. And that was the first of a few here in this second half, and just the start of Will Greer. And that drive right there really put him into a rhythm that he never got out of, and this offense really performed great in the second half. The second WVU drive of the second half saw Logan Timmons get in and see action at fullback. So not only is WVU employing these tight ends, they're also employing Logan Timmons as a fullback with that. And you're seeing some really, like I said, some tight looks from this offense, and some different looks that you haven't seen in a while, and some different looks you haven't seen at all. And then on that second drive, it also ended in Greer throwing a perfectly placed ball to the outside shoulder of Gary Jennings for another touchdown. This one was from 28 yards out, and that pushed the Mountaineer lead up to 27-7. Following that, Tennessee would go on to score midway through the third quarter and score their second touchdown. This was following a pass interference call on West Virginia's defense when it looked like they were tuning in to stop them there and maybe hold them to a field goal or even less. But the pass interference kept the drive going, and Tennessee ended up scoring, making the West Virginia lead 27-14. Then Will Greer finished off his red-hot third quarter with yet another touchdown pass. This one was Kennedy McCoy from 14 yards out, and it was actually the first action Kennedy McCoy seen in this game, and it came with about under 2 minutes left to go in the third quarter, and he snuck out on a wheel route, breakdown and coverage by Tennessee. They covered both the West Virginia tight ends, who were both in on the play running routes, and left Kennedy McCoy all alone. Easy pitch and catch touchdown for Kennedy McCoy, and the West Virginia lead went up to 33-14 following a failed 2-point conversion. I mentioned Will Greer had a red-hot third quarter, and did he ever, as his numbers showed, 9 for 11 passing for 156 yards and 3 touchdowns to really pull the Mountaineers away in this game. So he showed 2 incompletions versus 3 touchdowns in that third quarter, just a red-hot quarter for Will Greer and the Mountaineer offense in general. Into the fourth quarter, the Mountaineer defense showed another big stop and showed more potential as Tennessee drove down the field again and got down into a goal situation, and the Mountaineers stopped them all 4 times this time, forcing them to turn the ball over on 4th and goal. Mentioned earlier in the game, they held them at the goal line, and then Tennessee threw a touchdown pass on 4th and goal. This time, the Mountaineer defense stands up and holds them on 4th and goal and forces a turnover on downs. The West Virginia offense throughout the 4th quarter was mainly just trying to chew clock, running a lot, taking their time, huddling up, and just trying to preserve the win, which is what you want to see when you got a big lead like that. But despite the offense mainly chewing up the clock, Will Greer would cap off his red-hot second half with one more touchdown pass towards the end of the 4th quarter as he hit David Sills yet again. David Sills' second receiving touchdown of the game from the 10-yard line from 10 yards out, and that put the lead up to 40-14, which is where the final score would end up after the Tennessee ran the clock out on their ensuing drive. I mentioned Will Greer in the 3rd quarter had more touchdown passes than incompletions, and he did that for the entire second half actually, as Will Greer's second half numbers showed 16 of 19 passing for 275 yards and 4 touchdowns. And I mentioned briefly earlier that the Mountaineers have really got a lot of weapons on offense this year, and it's not just the same guys, even though Sills and Jennings did get their numbers, but West Virginia really spread the ball around in this game. They actually completed passes to 11 different players, and the 11 different players that caught passes were, of course, David Sills, Gary Jennings, TJ Simmons, as I mentioned, who had the touchdown, Marcus Sims, Trevon Wesco caught 2 passes at tight end, and Giovanni Haskins caught 1 pass at tight end as well. Dominique Maiden, as a reserve receiver, had a catch in there. Alex Sinkfield caught passes out of the backfield, as did Martell Pettaway and Kennedy McCoy. And Tevin Bush got in there and caught a pass as well out of his inside receiver spot. We also got to see a lot of newcomers to the WVU football team see their first action in the season and opening win. Some of them were linebacker Charlie Benton, who I mentioned earlier, unfortunately was lost for the season in this game due to a knee injury, so hope for a speedy recovery there as he can play a part in the next couple of years at linebacker for the Mountaineers. Nose tackle Kenny Bigelow, redshirt freshman free safety E.J. Brown, right guard Joe Brown, true freshman running back Letty Brown, center Jacob Butchergrossi, whose first couple of seasons there were plagued with injury, finally got a chance to get on the field and looked good. Sam linebacker and former walk-on, I mentioned briefly, Shea Campbell. True freshman linebacker Josh Chandler. Sophomore transfer tight end from Miami, Chilani Haskins. Redshirt freshman linebacker Exree Lowe. Cornerback, the junior, another JUCO transfer, Josh Norwood. Formerly was at Ohio State. Then true freshman safety Quantel Raines got in there. Grad transfer defensive end Jabril Robinson. Alabama transfer wide receiver mentioned earlier TJ Simmons. Redshirt freshman running back Alex Sinkfield. True freshman defensive end Dante Stills. And another JUCO corner that was formerly at Michigan in Keith Washington. Also briefly mentioned the position battles that were ongoing throughout camp earlier, and this is the way that a lot of them shook out. At halfback, Pettaway was the most used with 9 carries, but Letty Brown was right there with him with 8 carries. Sinkfield was actually the second one to get into the game, and he saw action as well, and he caught 2 passes. I think he only had 1 carry actually though. And then McCoy was actually surprisingly the least used at halfback, not coming in until late in the 3rd quarter when he caught the touchdown reception. And they were running him in the 4th quarter, and he actually looked pretty good on his carries up until he did have the 1 turnover for the Mountaineers in this game when he fumbled on their drive in the start of the 4th quarter. So it's probably going to be a running back by committee there. I think that the freshmen Sinkfield and Brown both look impressive. And I mentioned earlier, I think that Pettaway and Brown will see the lion's share of the carries and be like the every down type backs. I think Letty Brown you'll see come in short yardage a lot. And I think you'll see Alex Sinkfield get in there as your change of pace guy. And then Kennedy McCoy will be your fresh legs maybe late in the game, which is what Dana tried to use him for in this game. But I think that your top 3 are Letty Brown, Alex Sinkfield, and Martell Pettaway. Then the other position battle, one of them was at center. Matt Jones got to start. Jacob Butchergrossi did get to play, and he looked good as well. But Matt Jones got to play the most, playing in 6 of the 10 offensive series, whereas Butchergrossi played in the other 4. Another position battle was at right guard. Joe Brown was the starter. He played 8 out of the 10 series. Chase Barrett actually played in the reserve role, playing 1 series, and I mentioned Isaiah Hardy, who was believed to be in competition there, only got in for 1 play in this game. Let's talk about some stats from this game for the Mountaineers in this season opening win. The WVU offense managed to put up 547 total yards and 40 points despite only being on the field for 61 plays, which was the fewest snaps the offense has had at West Virginia since 2011, which was Dana Holgerson's first year back when West Virginia was still in the Big East. So Tennessee did try and do the ball control, and they were pretty successful in that. West Virginia only got 61 snaps, but they were very efficient with those 61 snaps as they put up 547 yards and 40 points in those 61 snaps. Will Greer mentioned his second half stats. For the game, he finished with a 73% completion rating, actually, going 25 of 34, and he actually had a career high in yards with 429 yards and tied his career high in passing touchdowns with 5. Rushing-wise, Martell Pettaway had the 9 carries for 58 yards. Letty Brown had 8 carries for 33 yards. Kennedy McCoy added 4 carries for 18 yards and the 14-yard touchdown reception. Alex Sinkfield did get 1 carry, managed 4 yards out of it, and had 2 catches for 15 yards. But I mentioned he could have had a touchdown in this game. Will Greer missed him a little bit on that wheel route earlier, but I think you'll see Sinkfield develop into a good weapon for this West Virginia offense as a change of pace back, and maybe have some home run hitting plays in this one, either catching passes out of the backfield or breaking a long run, because he looked pretty quick out there. Receiving wise, David Seals had 7 catches for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. Gary Jennings had 6 catches for 113 yards and also caught a touchdown. TJ Simmons had the 1 catch for the 59-yard touchdown. Marcus Sims managed 2 catches for 40 yards. Javon Wesco at tight end had 2 catches for 35 yards, and Javani Haskins at tight end had 1 catch for 9 yards. Defensive-wise, WVU defense held Tennessee to only 301 total yards, which was the lowest that WVU has held an opposing offense to total yards-wise since they defeated TCU back in 2016. The run defense also held Tennessee to 129 yards, which is pretty impressive considering this Tennessee offense last year averaged over 200 yards rushing a game, and their offensive line was believed to be improved this season. So the WVU defense was very impressive, especially on the defensive line, going up against this Tennessee offensive line, which was expected to try and run down their throats, and they couldn't do that, and the Mountaineers held them to just over 100 yards rushing and only 300 total yards of offense. Real impressive performance by this defense. The most impressive stat to me from the defense was that they recorded 12 tackles for the loss, which was actually the 4th most in the country in Week 1 and the most for a team facing another Power 5 team. So that was very impressive that the Mountaineer defense had those 12 tackles for a loss, with a lot of them coming from the defensive line. And the Mountaineers actually had 9 different players record tackles for a loss, and the 12 tackles for loss were the most by a West Virginia team since 2011 as well. So a very impressive performance by this Mountaineer defense, especially on that defensive front. Individually on the defense, Kenny Robinson had 9 total tackles, and David Long also had 9 total tackles, and one of them was a tackle for a loss. Javon Askew-Henry had 8 total tackles, 1 being a tackle for a loss. Dylan Tonkery had 6 total tackles, 1 being a tackle for a loss. Darius Stills, the nose tackle that had impressed throughout the spring, we heard a lot about, until Kenny Bigelow arrived from USC and took that spot. He was just as impressive as Kenny Bigelow, and we have really 2 good nose tackles in both of those guys. Darius Stills had 2.5 tackles for a loss. Kenny Bigelow, the transfer from USC, I mentioned him. He was very impressive from the very first snap, and he had 2 tackles for a loss and the forced fumble on the game's very first play. And then Reese Donahue, who got the start at defensive end, looked much improved, a lot stronger, a lot bigger, and he had 2 tackles for a loss and a sack for the Mountaineers. The season opening win moved Dana Holgerson to 6-2 overall in his 8 season openers as head coach at West Virginia. I mentioned the offense being very efficient, especially in the second half. They were over 3 on third downs in the first half, but they ended up being 5 for 6 on third downs in the second half. So 5 for 9 on the game on third downs, you'll take that. And then actually the offense only had 4 negative plays where they lost yards for the whole game, so that's really impressive, and you want them to keep up that pace. The offense also averaged 8.1 yards per play for the game, and I felt that was impressive because that is actually the exact number that the Oklahoma Sooners averaged last year per play for the season was 8.1 yards per play, and that set an NCAA record. So if the Mountaineers can keep up that pace, they would tie an NCAA record, and if their offense can perform at that pace, this potential is through the roof for this offense and for this team, really. Following the game, Will Greer was named Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week, and he was also actually named the Walter Camp National Offensive Player of the Week for his performance, and that made him the first WVU player to receive the National Player of the Week honor since 2014. So all in all, just a very impressive performance. The offense performed as expected, especially in that second half, and you'd like to see them perform the whole game that way and see how impressive it can be if they can be that efficient for an entire game. And I think that they're only going to get better as the season progresses. As I mentioned, they're breaking in some different looks, different terminologies, and some tighter formations and stuff that I think they really got more accustomed to in that second half, and they really settled in and looked very impressive. And the Mountaineer defense as well, I mentioned on the preview that I think they're going to really surprise some people, especially with the depth on this defensive line, and they did just that. The 12 tackles for a loss was very impressive, and holding Tennessee to only 300 total yards was very impressive as well. And the team as a whole, I think, performed and turned a lot of heads, not only among the WVU fan base, but also around the country. And because people are thinking that if this West Virginia defense can continue to perform this way throughout the season with the offense that they have, that this potential for this team is really through the roof, and they may actually be able to challenge Oklahoma for this Big 12 title, like a lot of us West Virginia fans have been predicted. So the Mountaineers get the 40-14 win in the season opener. In my preview show, I predicted 38-17, so I wasn't too far off there. I thought this defense would impress in a lot of areas, and they did. They were flying around out there. I mentioned earlier, Tony Gibson said this may be the fastest defense he had, and it sure looked the part in this one. And the offense was as advertised, especially in that second half. Mountaineers are 1-0, and you'll take that every year to start the season undefeated and at 1-0, especially when you're taking on another Power 5 opponent, as they were this season, as they took on an SEC opponent in Tennessee. And that will pretty much wrap up the Game 1 recap as the Mountaineers defeat the Tennessee Volunteers 40-14 in the season opening game to start the 2018 WVU football season. We will be back later this week on the Country Roads Webcast to preview the upcoming game this Saturday as the Mountaineers prepare for the home opener as they take on the Youngstown State Penguins on Saturday night. This has been the Country Roads Webcast, brought to you by Trio 4 Productions. I'm your host, Jordan Cruz. If you haven't already, follow us on Twitter at WVU Country Roads. And as always, let's go Mountaineers!
Are you ready to party? Country Roads!